welcome. The show is in honor of. It's a show for veterans, about veterans, and today we got a really special show because we've had a good friend come back again, and we're going to talk about some things that are very pertinent to the veteran and his career and his life. John Bartow. John, thank you for coming back.
My pleasure.
Okay. John's the senior service officer from the VFW?
Yeah, Department Service Officer, yeah, for the
Right.
Eastern region.
For the Eastern region,
Yeah.
okay. And of course, Paul Dietrich, who makes it all work, and he puts things together. I can't take responsible for doing all of the shows. It's Paul's
So the blame all
background.
comes to me.
Blame all comes in. How you been, John?
I've been well.
Good.
How
Okay.
about you guys?
Good. Well, you know, I think today what I'd like to get into is a little bit more about what the veteran does to realize his benefits through the VFW or through the VA rather.
Sure.
And we're going to pick on your expertise and give some advice and maybe help us clear up some misnomers or bad information that's out there. And I know I've gotten a few phone calls myself that have come through, and I'm sure Paul gets them all the time, because Paul's all over the state of New York. He's, you know, I called for Paul the other day. He's up in Rochester, and
He does a lot for us. He does a lot for the
yeah.
VFW, yeah.
yeah, he's a good friend to have, believe me.
Oh, yes.
So tell us, what are some of the things that you think that the veteran should be aware of when dealing with the VA?
Okay. Yeah, what I can do is I can help you with what we're seeing a lot of, misconceptions, stuff like that. Rumors, the rumor mill. You know, while we were in the military, rumors drove how we thought and reacted to things. And when we're veterans, that still happens.
That
as
hasn't
well.
changed since the 60s.
Yep, probably hasn't changed since the 1760s. You're right.
Right.
So, you know, what I'd like to clear up is just a few different things about service connection, about pensions, death benefits, stuff like that. We can start with service connection. How's that sound? Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
So what we see a lot of, you go on the internet nowadays, it's like WebMD, right?
Right.
You get a headache, you check your symptoms on WebMD, next thing you know, you have brain cancer.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, there's doctors, nurses, everyone's chiming in. The same thing happens with VA benefits. There's attorneys out there, Veterans Law Blog, there's
Rep for Vet.
Yep, Rep for Vets, former VSOs talking
Right.
on the internet, and of course the veterans talking on the internet, giving each other, hey, this is what happened with my case. I think it's very important that first off, every veteran recognizes that they are an individual. Their disabilities are very different from one another. Paul and I might be service connected for something, and let's say we were both service connected for a heart condition, right? That could look the same on paper, but diagnostically and medically, very different. You know, there might be reasons why the VA rated us that are very different. So I think the first problem that veterans have is they look around and they say, hey, you know, my buddy Bob is service connected at 100%. I have the same thing. Why am I not service connected at 100%? So I can clear that up through explaining how service connection works, okay? You can be an expert in the way the VA thinks if you think simply, okay? There's three things that have to do with service connection. And the first one is you have to have a current disability. So something has to be wrong with you. You could have been injured. You could have been, you could have had an illness while you were on active duty that you don't have now. The VA can't do anything about that because it's not bothering you today.
Right.
So that's the first thing, is you have to have a current disability. A second example would be, or the second point of service connection, I'm sorry, is that it has to be chronic in nature. Okay, so it has to be something that is going to bother you for a long time, and that second point of service connection is also it has to have occurred on active duty. You had to have complained about it, or there has to be a diagnosis. So that's important. Okay, if the evidence shows, diagnosis is simple. It's diagnosed, boom, done. Right. if the evidence shows that you are complaining of symptoms of that disease without a diagnosis, that also works for service connection in most cases. So, for instance, if you're complaining that you have headaches all the time, and you're on active duty, you complain, I have headaches, they're horrible, and when 6 months after you get out, you're diagnosed with chronic migraines, that's an example of complaints on active duty, and then now you have a current disability, the VA can rate you accordingly. There's another sidebar to that, presumptive service connection. So there's many conditions that the VA acknowledges that as a result of your service, if you have this disease, they presume that it was caused by military service.
Agent Orange is the perfect example.
Yeah, the conditions associated with Agent Orange. So that's actually a good thing to bring up. A lot of people say, oh, Joe, he has the Agent Orange. What Joe has is he's got a condition that the VA recognizes as being caused by Agent Orange. So an example would be ischemic heart disease.
Right.
The VA recognizes that Agent Orange caused that. Diabetes type 2, the VA recognizes Agent Orange caused that disease. With that, you don't have a burden of proof. You don't have to prove to the VA that hey, I had this because of that. The only thing you have to prove to the VA is you were boots on ground in Vietnam, then they acknowledge that.
Or for some people, on the DMZ in Korea.
Yes, right. Yep, on the DMZ, and that's hard to prove for a lot of guys.
Yeah.
That's very hard to prove.
Right.
So those are the two paths. And the last part of it, the last component is called the nexus. Then all the nexus is a connector that connects the two. So the way the VA establishes a nexus most times is through an exam. So they schedule you for an exam with a doctor. The doctor examines you. He looks through your medical records, your military medical records. So this is the simplest thing to learn with regard to this, to clear up a lot of things, is that if he sees it in your military records, he sees it occurring now, then he makes the bridge and says, there's your nexus, your connector. It really is that simple. So a lot of guys, I think a lot of guys and girls will start believing that the VA is working against them. The VA, is plotting to deny them benefits, when in reality it's very evidence-based. They're going to grant it if they can, okay? But they have to have the evidence in order to do it. So let me give you a specific example. I can give you two really good ones. We had a gentleman that I served with. He jumped out of an airplane and the static line got wrapped underneath his arm, and when it did, it twisted around his arm. It broke every bone from his collarbone down, okay, broke all the bones, shattered them just into Rice Krispies,
Okay.
Degloved his hand, pulled all the skin off, really messed him up really bad. So he required dozens of surgeries to repair all of this stuff. Basically he has a robot arm now, okay? When he got out of the military, it was a shock to a lot of people that he was 0% service connected. Now, we as service officers, you're going to hear a lot of service officers say we love 0%, and this is why. This man gets out of the military at 41 years old. He has 0% for everything, had to do with that arm. But what's going to happen as he gets older? He's going to develop arthritis. He's going to develop more pain, chronic pain associated with this. All those numbers are eventually going to go up as long as the evidence supports that. The reason why he was 0% is because the military fixed him. He had full range of motion. Everything worked normally. He wasn't in pain. So that's an example of he does not have a current disability. It's horrible. It sounds horrible, but it's factual. Currently he reports no pain. He has full range of motion. So they service connect the injuries because they happened on active duty. They 0% them. So the VA essentially is saying to you at that point, we know you got injured, and we're ready to help you with these problems as they get worse, as they develop. So that's a really good example, okay, of how the VA service connection might shock you. You'll hear a lot of people say, so-and-so lost their leg in combat. Why are they not 100%? Well, if they have a really good prosthetic and everything's working right, that's why they're not at 100% disability. It's all based on what is their occupational capacity. So this person, one gentleman might be missing a leg. He can run a marathon, while another, the loss of that leg might have resulted in problems with his other leg. The prosthetic didn't take well. Now he's a mess. He might be 100% because his hips are messed up, his back,
Yeah.
So that's why it's so important to look at everyone as an individual. Each person's body is going to react to treatment differently than another. So, some people it takes, some people it doesn't. So, that's a really good example of how 0% could come back. What we also see a lot of is people will get injured, sometimes grievously, and not have a current disability. So, you'll hear that a lot. So-and-so got shot. Well, if it was a clean pass-through,
Right.
and their muscles are retained and everything's okay, the VA will acknowledge the scarring. If the scarring's painful, they'll treat all these conditions as well. That's something important to note, is that the VA will treat everything that you're service connected for free. So that's kind of the principle of service connection. Do you have any questions with that stuff? Or?
No, it's number one, and I have to say this at this point.
Yeah.
If you think you've got a situation where you're service-connected injury and what have you, if you don't go see a service officer,
Right.
you need your head examined.
That is true.
Because just listening to him for the last 10 minutes, 15 minutes, wealth of information and the know-how and how to get past certain hurdles and get things done. If you don't contact your VFW or your American Legion service officer, you need your head examined.
I agree with you there.
Okay.
And
This is like you have a complex tax situation. Do you try to do it yourself and get in trouble with the IRS? Or do you have somebody who does this for a living do it for you? And
Good
by the
point.
way,
Very good
there is
point,
no
Paul.
charge from the VFW or the American Legion
Yeah.
Yes.
for a veteran,
It's for
whether you're a
free.
member or not.
It's for free, and it represents everything that you've got going for you in your life. It's so important to know.
And we're honored to help all veterans. Like Paul said, you don't have to be eligible for the VFW. We'll help any veteran. If you wrote that check, we're here to help you.
Yeah.
And that's like you said. All the service organizations have great service officers. On a quick note, which you said there, given the three things I said, that is not set in stone. We have ways of helping veterans establish evidence for service connection. An example would be the big fire in '73. I know a lot of people are curious about that. The National Personnel Records Center, there was a ton of records that got burned up.
Right.
The VA went through great lengths to recover a lot of that stuff, but especially the Army, guys that served in the Army in the 50s and 60s, a lot of their records were completely destroyed. How do we establish evidence to help these veterans? A lot of times they have a yearbook, and there's pictures of them in the yearbook with their platoon, or they can find a buddy they served with that maybe saw them break that ankle or
Right.
fall off that rock, and and the VA understands that as well. The VA allows, they put more weight on that evidence that we submit to them, based upon the fact that they did lose their records.
Right.
There's always a way that we can try and we'll give 110% to try and help the veteran establish that evidence they need for the connection. So all hope is not lost if it's not in your records. A lot of guys were injured in the field in combat, still today. We have Marines that are getting injured in combat in Afghanistan. There's no record of it. They're at some remote outpost, and they have a corpsman patching them up, and there's no record of it. We have to help them establish the evidence.
And the average guy that's been out in the field in combat like that, if he gets the corpsman patch him up, the furthest thing from his mind is making an official record of it.
That is true.
He goes on fighting or doing what he's got to do, trying to stay alive.
Yeah.
And
Suck it up and move on.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, and that's what you're trained in the military.
Yep.
Just
Yeah.
chuck it up, that's it.
Yep.
You know,
And we've had to
Toughen
help
up.
sailors. We've had to help sailors explain. You know, we've had to explain to the VA when a ship is underway and it goes under general quarters. You know, everyone's a gunner's mate, or you know, they've said, hey, you were a yeoman. We can't service connect you, but yet this yeoman's general quarters station was on twin 50 caliber machine guns.
Right.
So his ears are hurting, you know, because he fired them during World War II for you know,
Exactly.
hours and hours and hours. So yeah, that's, you know, there are ways around to establish that evidence.
What's the newest on Camp Lejeune?
Camp Lejeune, 8 August, so coming up here, they're going to have another national conference. What they do at these conferences is they determine the science that's commissioned to study these presumptive conditions. Physicians get together, attorneys get together, legislators get together. They have a conference and they look at the probability that the condition caused, that the exposure caused the condition. So their next conference, and this is also on the VA website, you can see it. They are going to have a national conference on the 8th and discuss how the science is progressing with recognizing the conditions.
But right now, I believe there's 8
Yes, I believe
illnesses
so. I believe so.
that are presumptive for if you served, I think it's more than 60 days, if I'm not mistaken.
30, I
30
believe.
days?
Yeah, it's on
At
the
Camp
website.
Lejeune.
You'd have to look it up. I can tell you this about Camp Lejeune. We see both. We see Camp Lejeune and Agent Orange veterans, okay? With our Agent Orange guys, there's a decent percentage that have had a presumptive condition develop in their as they age. With Camp Lejeune, it is severe. Almost every single person that was exposed to Camp Lejeune contaminated water has a condition on the presumptive list. We see, at least it's been my experience, most of our Camp Lejeune veterans, you can just look at them and say, when did you get bladder cancer? And it's really kind of scary, to be honest with you. There's Camp Lejeune is that whatever was in that water caused a lot of damage to our veterans. In respect to Agent Orange, I don't know if you're aware, the blue water legislation passed the House.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Yes, I
and it's
am.
going up for a Senate vote. So hopefully our blue water guys, common sense prevailed, hopefully, and you know, people realize the wind blows from west to east,
Right,
and
exactly.
and that our blue water veterans were exposed to Agent Orange.
One of the things that I brought up when I was talking to the senators and the representatives down in D.C. was, I said, do you guys realize how they make water on a ship to drink?
Desalinization, yeah.
They take it out of the ocean. I said, every river in that country drains into the ocean.
Yeah.
So whatever was on the land is in the ocean and then is distilled into your water. So I don't understand how this is not considered.
Yeah.
And it was almost like lights went on in some of the people's heads when I spoke this, because I don't think they realized it. For some reason, I think they thought you had a big water tank on the ship that you drank from, but
Yeah.
Well, you do.
yeah, but you put the water
we
into
had
it.
evaporators that were going 24/7.
Yes,
I was a
making it.
machinist, and
Yeah.
we had to keep those evaporators up and running, and they
And
were going
that's where the-
24/7 to fill your fresh water tanks up.
Yes.
And it's allegedly fresh water that's being filled up with, but like Paul said, Agent Orange drifted into that water. You know.
Yep.
Plus, we had guys that were on offshore fire missions on like the DDGs and stuff, who saw the Operation Ranch Hand airplanes defoliating, you know, and like we say, winds blow from west to east.
Yep.
That stuff's blowing right out, you know, right out
Exactly,
offshore,
yeah.
you know?
All these sins are coming back to us.
Yes.
John, maybe you can help us out with this. I know that the rumor mill we talked about earlier, it goes crazy. And I've heard from veterans, and we talked about it earlier, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's not an uncommon thing for a veteran to believe that if you die in a veteran VA facility, that your spouse gets all your benefits.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a great concern about, right now, most especially, our aging veteran population, the guys that served from about 1955, 60 to 75. You know, let's face it, it's getting towards end of life for a lot of those guys. And a lot of these gentlemen that are service connected are misinforming their spouses, and it's heartbreaking when they come to our office and they say, how come the VA cut off our money? And it's the most heartbreaking thing I've seen so far. And that is one of the rumors. We call them smoking room rumors.
Right.
The guys will say, you know, if I die in a VA hospital, you'll get my benefits. If I have the heart attack, bring me to the VA. That is true in some cases. Okay. The only time that is essentially true is if you're service connected. I'll give you an example. So an Agent Orange veteran, service connected for ischemic heart disease. If he dies of a heart attack, and the doctor puts heart attack, ischemic heart disease on his death certificate, his wife is then entitled to what's called DIC, death indemnity compensation. Now, if he was 100% with a spouse, he was getting about $3,100 to $3,200 if he had no extra special monthly things, okay? When he dies, his wife will get anywhere from $1,400 to the high $1,500s, okay? That's it. That's that disability indemnity compensation. Now, guys that are 100%, they need to be 100% for 10 years before their spouse is guaranteed to get that DIC compensation. So it's important, like you bring up so well, it's important that it doesn't matter which service organization you use, it's important for these guys to go to their service officer and say, I want a plan for the end. You know, if something should happen to me, what do I do? What we do in our office is we make them a death folder and we staple our card to it. And what happens when somebody passes? The first thing you hear is, you know, what can I do for you? What can I do for you? You have that second cousin who's coming up.
Right.
What can I do? Take this folder and go to John. And now I know that this veteran has passed. I can take care of everything. I can take care of the flag. I can take care of if they want to be buried in a national cemetery, stuff like that. You know, if they're buried in a private cemetery, I can get their medallion all taken care of. That's the best option, is to just be prepared in that way. And then if there is pension paperwork involved, you know, that we can assist with that.
Right.
Something else, for the spouses of deceased veterans, this is another heartbreaking thing. We've noticed some that are struggling a great deal. They get very little Social Security. They are on their own with no help or very little help from gracious people. Tell them to contact us, please, please, because there are ways that we can adjust their income. You know, that if they're paying medical expenses that they're not reimbursed for, we can try and get them a non-service connected pension.
And unfortunately, I'm Vietnam era.
Yes.
Okay. And a lot of those guys who are Vietnam era are up in their 70s now.
Yes.
So I hate to think of it this way, but
Yeah.
time is running out.
It's a harsh reality.
It's a harsh reality.
It is.
Yeah, you know.
You know, I give those folders to when we have a veteran, let's say it's his first time getting service connected, even if he's 25. And he comes in and says, thank you for, you know, everything you've done. We say, hold on, we got one more thing to do. Yeah. And we give him the death folder. And we say, you know, you give this to a loved one, and should something happen to you, you know,
Right.
to bring it to us.
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to step back on, because this is something that I've found. We run a Veterans Help Desk,
Yep.
normally on Veterans Day, but we're going to be running one also at our county fair. The biggest thing that I found from veterans is I don't have my discharge. I moved, it's lost, and it's the simplest form in the world. It's called an SF-180.
Yeah.
We always have the forms with us. Fill this out, it tells you where to mail it, or you can do it electronically, but you've got to have your discharge. That discharge has to be kept someplace where your spouse can get it.
Yes.
In my posts here on Staten Island, in the past 3 years, we've had 6 veterans who passed and their spouses could not find their discharge.
Yep.
And fortunately,
Very common.
Fortunately, our post keeps in a locked safe all the discharges from all our veterans, and we were able to pull them, give them to the family, because at that point we no longer need them, and they were able to have the honors at the funeral home and at the cemetery because of that. But if you don't have your paper, SF-180, if you have a computer, you can go online and get it. It's not the most difficult form in the world to fill out. A couple lines, you got to sign it, and it tells you where to send it in. But realistically, keep that discharge. If you got a safe deposit box, put it in there. But let your spouses know where it is.
That's
John, I'm sorry. Very important. Somebody wants to get in touch with you or service officers in general. Is there a general number they can reach out and say, who's my service officer? Or
what they could do, they could contact us. You want me to give out my number?
Yeah, sure.
So they could contact us at 518-626-5687.
no, repeat that again.
Sure, 518-626-5687. They'll probably get Ms. Ramos, our claims consultant. She starts the process for everybody. Another way is you can go on e-benefits for people that use the e-benefits system, and there's a link to find a representative, and you can pick from a very long list of service organizations. And along those lines with the discharge, a lot of times once people establish that we're their representative, what we've recently discovered is the VA has it. Most of the time. Not all of the time, but most of the time the VA has it. So we can go in and verify their service dates the minute they sign on with us. And that also applies if someone passes away. Get a hold of us. We'll do that power of attorney, and boom, we can find their discharge paperwork very quickly.
Because that's distressing.
It is. And that's good business practice. So your post keeps those. That's really good.
In my opinion, you're one of the most valuable people that we've had on this show in the past 6 years, because you're giving them pointed direction, pointed information, and where they can go. I can't thank you enough for being here.
It's my pleasure.
And I'm going to ask you if you can come back again, because I'm sure we're just touching on
Absolutely.
the fringes right now, and there are so many areas that we can cover.
Absolutely.
Paul, you have any last comments?
Just important that while John is based in Albany, he does come to the New York City area.
Yes.
So again, contact him. If he needs to see you face to face, they will make arrangements for that to happen. He's down in the city right now, handling claims. That's why he's here. So get in touch with him. Don't sit there or don't try to fight the VA yourself. Work with somebody that knows how the systems operate, and get in touch with John.
Absolutely.
John, I thank you.
Thank you.
And for those watching, we love bringing you this type of programming. For the veteran that's out there, if you've got something that's coming to you in a way of benefits, use whatever sources you got to get it. You've earned it, like Paul said.
It's true.
And John is one source to getting it done. You just keep watching in honor of. We love you for watching us, and we will continue to bring you shows like this.